All right, hello everyone. You are all an incredibly smart audience, and you're all a very incredible, smart, honest audience, and it doesn't actually matter because cognitive biases are really going to screw up what you do anyways. So essentially, we all have them no matter how smart we are, no matter how long we've been doing this job. We are all subject to these ridiculous tricks that our brains play on us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how that manifests and how we can work around it a little bit, because you can't uncognitive bias yourself, but when you know it's there, you can work around it, and you can work with your teammates to help you not fall prey to these things. So our brains were really good at surviving, woolly mammoths and not eating the poison berries and all kinds of things like that are very kind of like, you're going to die today. We're not as good at making nuanced product decisions where there's more than one answer, and that's what we're called upon to do. So cognitive biases hurt the questions that we ask. We ask bad questions. They impact what people tell us in response, and they impact what we hear, which is usually what we want to hear. So I'm going to tell a little story. I travel fairly often. I travel up to Seattle quite often, and I have kids, so the least disruptive thing is to take the last flight of the night. And that means that when I get in, it's dark, I'm tired, and I don't really want to talk to anyone. And so imagine how delighted I was when I saw an email saying, would you like to sign up to unlock your hotel room with your phone? And I was like, yes, this sounds amazing. And I imagined whoever thought of this product idea, it also sounded amazing. We're going to build this, it's going to be a killer feature, it's going to be great. And somehow this got all the way into production, and yet I don't think it actually achieved what they needed it to do. And you think about, well, how did this happen? And part of it is that what we typically want to do when we have a great idea is we are subject to confirmation bias. We look for evidence that proves us right. We kind of ignore things that don't quite align with our worldview. And we don't do this on purpose, which is the important thing. This is not a malicious thing. It's just the thing that happens. And so sometimes we do things like we ask this question, which I've seen on every survey ever: how likely would you be to use this, right? How likely would you be to use this unlock your hotel room with your phone? Oh, 5 out of 5, amazing, right? Because once you've asked me that, it's a thing that I might have, and I don't want to give up a thing that I could have. And I haven't thought through the details because as a customer, that's not my job, that's your job. And when you ask a question like this, we're just circumventing that whole universe of, is this a good idea, or is this something that I care about? Instead, if we ask something about, we want to abstract up a little and say, tell me about your hotel room stays. Tell me about when you get in, when you come back to your room. It's an open-ended question. You're not going to get a neat, quantifiable 5 out of 5. But if you ask customers this, and nowhere along the line do they say, and I keep losing my hotel room key and it's the worst, maybe it's not that important to feature. And in fact, when you ask these questions of your regular visitors, your frequent travelers, they're probably going to have big pain points that keep coming up, and those are the things that you should be fixing. Even if they're not as sexy sounding as a thing on my phone that sounds amazing, it might be the thing that I really care about. But as soon as you ask me, do I want this, I'm probably going to say yes. When you say, what are you doing? What is a struggle to you today? You get very different answers. So you ask me about this, how often do I lose my hotel room card key? I mean, occasionally, but also how often do I get back to my hotel room with my phone out of batteries? Because I've been out all day. Like my phone right now is probably at 2% backstage, right? So I couldn't get into my hotel room. But when we hear this, it's not what we want to hear. And so the next thing that kicks in is cognitive dissonance, is when we have two contradicting ideas in our head, and we don't like the idea that they're both there. So I'm a good product manager. I have a good feature. We just did this site redesign. It's amazing. And customers are complaining. And what happens? We've all been through this, right? Someone inevitably will say, you're talking to the right customers. Like maybe you're just talking to dumb users. And sometimes you get a diplomatic version of this, but that's really what everyone in the room wants to think, is like, that's a way to get out of the contradiction. Like, I built a good site redesign. The customers hate it. The customers don't get it. Except that's not, it makes us feel better for a second, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem. And so a thing that I've found really useful is to just assume it's true for a second. Just embrace the uncomfortable belief. And this is really useful in team meetings where you're having this kind of dynamic and you say, okay, let's just assume the thing we don't want to believe is true. Now what? But it's not. I know. And we have this exact dialogue. I know. We built a great site redesign, but let's just pretend for a second that customers are having a problem with it. What do we do now? And for some reason, just the semantic act of saying we're going to pretend one of these things is true frees up everyone's mind to actually think through, oh, maybe we could ask people how they're using it. Maybe we could look at usage patterns. Maybe we could figure out that the site redesign actually looks visually better, but we accidentally hid some core feature. There's an answer there, and this allows us to get to it. But we can't if we just kind of dig down on that thing where we don't even want to think about it. We run into survivorship bias all the time. So I don't know if anyone's familiar with this story. World War II fighter planes came back riddled with bullet holes. We didn't want to keep losing planes or people, and so some folks in the military were like, let's look at these planes and reinforce the parts where the bullets landed. Until a statistician, Wald, spoke up and said, well, the planes that came back. So maybe we should patch everywhere else, because if you got hit in this particular part of the plane, you never came back for us to even look at. And that's survivorship bias, or in our world, it's happy customer bias. If we ask our customers who are using the product and love the product what we should do next, there's a whole universe of people out there that we're not hearing from. And if we keep building for these happy customers, we're just building towards a niche audience until there's 5 people in the world who love our product and a lot who don't care about it at all. So we want to talk to happy customers because we like them and it makes us feel good. And again, confirmation bias, we believe we're doing a good job, and we are, but there's always room for improvement. We want to talk to people who submit feedback to us because they've already shown that they care, right? We should listen to them. They sent us suggestions. They're on the phone with us. We kind of can't get away from them, even if we wanted to. But the people who send you feedback and submit requests are weird. They are a self-selected population of people who care more than the average. And God bless them because they do a lot of good things for us. And also, we cannot sustain a business based on those people. So instead, who do we want to talk to? The people who are hard to get at. Churned customers used to use your product. Now they don't anymore. That's a really good audience to go to and say, hey, I know this is going to be kind of awkward and don't feel bad and we're not trying to win you back, but what did you hate about our product? What drove you away? What are you doing now? You want to look at low usage customers because that's just the future looking forward to these churned customers. They're on their way out. They're not getting product value. You can see they log in once a week when you're expecting daily. There's something wrong and you need to figure out what it is. Non-customers using competitor products is actually probably the easiest to get a hold of because you can find folks on Twitter, on Craigslist, ask a friend, hey, are you using this product that competes with us? What do you like about it? What value are you getting? Sometimes you learn that their expectations for a competitor product are completely different and you're not meeting them. And as someone who works for Microsoft, I can say I find that all the time now. People are using someone else's product. They have expectations that are aligning very well where we aren't. So we want to go out there, avoid that survivorship bias, and talk to people who don't really want to talk to us. And this is incredibly uncomfortable, and everything in our brain is screaming, no, don't do this, which is why we have to. We can ask things like, if you had to change one thing, what tasks in this product do you put off doing? How have you done this differently in the past? And the reason for these kind of question is that it gets around the thing where you're saying, what do you like about our product, or what could we fix? That's actually a really hard question to answer. There are some people who will say, I want this feature, build this feature I've asked for, but we really want to give people permission to complain, because we know that there are complaints lodged in there, and a lot of people are too polite to bring them up, or they think maybe they'll lose some kind of vendor leverage if they bring them up, or they don't want themselves to seem like someone who doesn't understand the product. They don't want to seem like a dumb customer. And so they might, I don't really want to bring this thing up because surely other people understand it. No, they don't. So if you ask a question like this, if you had to change one thing, if there's a thing about this that you dread, what is it? It kind of frees them to say, oh, okay, well, now that you mention it, I really hate sending out mass emails because I'm always convinced I'm going to screw it up because your preview is confusing. You say, oh, okay, no one's ever written in and told us that, and now I know, and I can go test that assumption with other people, and maybe I'll find that, wow, there are actually a lot of people who feel this way, but it's a hard to articulate problem. So when we ask things like this, we're giving permission to complain, and I say that a lot. Like, you should have people complaining. If people are not complaining about your product, then they don't care about it. That's hands down. Silence is not consent in this case. It means like we're actually thinking about other products. We're all subject to something called the curse of knowledge, and that means that once we have a fact or a skill in our head, we can't remember what life was like beforehand. We don't remember what it was like to not understand that. And people who are in the room or parents will have this experience where you just look at your kids doing something and you're like, don't you know? No, you don't, because I haven't told you that, and you haven't been alive for that many years, so how could you possibly? How this manifests for us is that the people who have been using your product for a while don't remember how terrible it was to get started. The people who have used this product and have only done things this way have no knowledge of what it was like to not understand that. And so one of the things that happens is that frequently, if we're trying to figure out something, we'll ask about, how was it to get started? How hard was it getting set up? Or how did you initially get your data into the system? And people tend to give you these very like, oh, it was pretty easy. Yeah, I think it was fine. Like, we did this about a year ago. Yeah. And you'll get these sort of non-committal, oh, it took a long time, but it was fine. We figured it out. This is my favorite thing. When people say, oh, I figured it out, that means they had something to figure out. And that means for every person who figured it out, there's probably 9 more who looked at it and said, forget this, closed their laptop, went somewhere else. Now they're solving your problem using email and carrier pigeons and Post-it notes, and they've given up. So when you ask this, you don't get a straight answer. Instead, for anything enterprisey, coworkers, for a consumer product, friends, I've found a direct turnaround where you ask, how was it to get set up? Oh, it was fine. Okay, suppose you had a new coworker join your team. What advice would you give them to get them started? People go, oh, all right, well, skip this tutorial. This part is good right here. Turn this feature off. Oh, you need this extension. Switch it to this theme. And they've got a whole list of things that once they've put themselves in the mindset of being the teacher, they remember. Because then they're able to empathize with a new user and they remember these things. And so what advice would you give? You get amazingly frank feedback because people don't feel like they're criticizing you. They feel like they are helping a friend. Another thing that's useful if people are too polite here is actually to open up a chat window and say, send a message to your friend telling them that they got to get this product and write it the way you would really write it. And you'll get people saying things like, I know the download takes forever, but it's worth it. Or, get this thing here. Oh, and let me send you a blog post on how to set it up because the instructions are terrible. Or, this part of it doesn't make any sense to me, but this one feature is really great. All stuff that they were not going to tell you. They weren't going to send you a feedback into your submission. They weren't going to file a bug on it. It's just when we're recommending to people, we don't want to lose that social capital. And that becomes more important than being polite to the PM in front of us. So making that room for someone to say something that we don't really want to hear, but we need to. We're all subject to social desirability bias. We edit what we say to make ourselves look good. We don't do it on purpose. I mean, sometimes we do, but most of the time we genuinely believe the thing we are saying. If you go to the average person and ask them something like, how often do you go to the gym? People will tell you 5 days a week, 7 days a week with a straight face. Because in our minds, we want to think that we're a person who goes to the gym every day. Don't we all want to be that person? And yet, we're not necessarily. And so when we ask this question, we're not going to get good answers. And you say, how much would you pay for this? Would you be willing to learn this new computer programming language? Would you be willing to take a class on this? Could you get your team to switch? People are like, yeah, I could get my team to switch. I could convince them. I want to be the kind of person who carries that weight. But we're not. And so, you can replace that by asking about the past instead, or by just not asking questions that have a riff of social desirability. So let's say we're building something to, improve meetings. And I look at you. Do you have a hard time meeting deadlines? Who wants to say yes to that, right? Like, we're all in a product, some of us might have our managers who are like, no, I'm really good at this all the time. It's never happened ever. And it's a lie, right? We all have these issues. And if I was building a product where I wanted to solve this problem, I don't want to hear about how you think you are a good person. I'm not your boss. I'm not going to fire you. I'm not going to give you a raise. I want to know what is the problem that I could be solving here. And when you ask a question like this, you're not going to get that answer. But instead, you can do something where you ask a much longer question that has the whiff of it's okay to say yes. So compare that with I say, hey, in the past month, tell me about a time when you got something done later than you originally promised, right? It doesn't say deadline. It's not a yes, no. It assumes that there must be a time, right? You would actually feel a little bit silly saying, oh, no, that's never happened. Like, it doesn't feel socially desirable to give that answer. And so you will actually think back and say, oh, let's see. In the last month, there was that write-up that I told my boss I would get done, and then I was waiting on data from another team, but I really should have followed up. And that's the kind of insights you want. If you're building a product to solve this, you want to know what happened to make this person late on a deadline. What could have prevented it? How in the past, your follow-up would be like, tell me about a time in the past when you met a deadline and you're really pleased with yourself. Maybe it's because you were working with your super organized friend, or because it was a project you were really passionate about, or because all the tools were laid out so that you didn't have to, put a lot of piecework in. That's the stuff you want to know. And so when you ask these sort of roundabout questions, we give people permission to admit to faults. We give people permission to be embarrassed or angry or ashamed or frustrated. And those are the emotions that make people want to solve problems, that make them want to buy products, to make them want to change behaviors. People don't change behaviors because they sort of vaguely think they ought to. We change behaviors to get rid of uncomfortable emotions like I feel dumb every time I use this product. Given the choice between a product that makes me feel a little dumb and one that's more expensive but makes me feel like I'm awesome, I'm going to go for the awesome one if I can possibly scrape together the budget for it. It's a no-brainer. But if you ask people things like, Likert scale, you're never going to get that. You're going to get 5 out of 5s that are meaningless. They might mean that you care, or they might just mean that you like saying 5. Any question that has a yes or no answer has a socially preferable answer. So people ask, how can we avoid this? Just don't ask yes/no questions when you're talking to customers. And this is very difficult from a semantic point of view. You will want to say, do you have this problem? Have you seen this? Would you use this? I know, because I still struggle with this. But any question that you would ask as a yes/no, you can reword as a how, who, when, where, why. Tell me about a time when. How much of an impact was it when this happened? Who was involved? How long did this take? You will still get answers sometimes where people say, no, I don't have this problem. But you also open up the floor to get all of this nuance where people say, like, oh, yeah, when I'm working on tedious work, I actually really have a hard time meeting deadlines. Or when I'm working with this particular team, I really struggle to get things done on time, or I struggle to get us to agree. You're going to get to something better. So one of my favorite stories is from someone I know who works in a free healthcare clinic, and when she started as a nurse practitioner, she was told that when people come in, you can't ask them, do you do drugs? Because they will all say no, because they assume someone's going to call the police. And so she was told, instead, you ask people, in the last week, how many times have you done and name explicit drug? In the past week, how many times have you smoked crack? In the past week, how many times have you used... And she was like, and people would answer. People would say it 4 times, every day, as much as I can. She's like, this is amazing. Why are they saying this? And it's because when you ask in that way, people assume that it's okay for the answer to be more than one, right? Well, she wouldn't have asked if it wasn't kind of okay to admit to it. So the reframing is incredibly powerful. Don't ask yes/no questions. Bring someone with you so they can kick you under the table when you start asking a yes/no question so you can stop and rephrase it. It's that important. The other thing we run into is the backfire effect. American politics is all about the backfire effect right now. We cannot present rational evidence to something that someone feels. It just doesn't work. That's a particularly painful instance of it, but anything in any product ever. If I believe that this product runs too slowly, you can't show me, usage, oh no, it runs, point hundredths of a second faster. No, I don't care. You're not going to convince me that way. If I think that I need this feature, you're not going to convince your customer, no, you really actually don't. It doesn't work. We can't fight feelings with facts. In fact, it has that effect of, now I want to double down. Now I'm going to use it just, twice as much, just to show you. This is not helpful. So what do we do instead? Oh, Twitter, classic example of where this happens. Then it's not actually, well, let me show you, the arguing does not actually help. So someone is wrong, people are wrong on the internet all the time. It has never been useful to say, actually, you're wrong. That doesn't go well. Instead, as any good improv would tell you, it's yes and. You're right, and. Well, your competitors have that feature. You're right. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about someone you know who uses that feature and why it's good for them. You're right. And let's talk about how our product is different. There's something incredibly disarming about someone telling you you're right when you were kind of spoiling for a fight, because they don't expect it. It takes the wind out of their sails. And sometimes you'll still get people who are like a little bit angry. Well, I still don't agree with you. But they can't keep going. You're not providing the fire. If you say something and you're expecting someone to argue, you're already, and when they do this, it deflates you. You're like, okay, well, let's talk then. And I've had so many conversations, even with incredibly angry coworkers and customers, over and over again. Nothing deflates better than you're right, except maybe I'm sorry. Doesn't have to be your fault. Doesn't matter if it's the user's fault. Telling them that has never been productive in the history of mankind. It's like, I'm sorry, you lost all your data because you did this incredibly dumb thing. I'm really sorry. That's really awful. Let's see if there's any way I can help you get your data back. It's hard to be angrier. You can maintain a level of anger, but you're not going to escalate once someone says, I'm sorry. So let's go back to my room key here. I think it's a cool idea. I'm the product manager who thought this up. I'm really excited. Or maybe my boss is, and they're like, we have to build this. This is going to make us the most, the most competitive hotel out there. We're going to build this whole system. Means we're going to have to build multiple apps. We're going to have to redo the door locks on every single door in every single hotel room, but it's going to be worth it, right? So we want to do this. Is this something I would use? How could we find out? Well, we know from the beginning you shouldn't ask how likely would you be to use this. On a similar note, you can't ask me things like, would you be more willing to stay at X hotel chain if you had this? Because what am I going to say? Yes. Because what does it cost me to say yes? Nothing. I'm not the one who has to replace every door lock on every room. I just kind of think this thing would be cool, so I'm going to say yes, because there is zero cost to me whatsoever. How would we actually find out? We might say something like, just to be sure I'm clear, if you had that already, how would it make your life easier? If I had the hotel card key on my phone, how would it make my life easier? I don't know, it'd be cool. Like, I literally cannot think of a time. When do I not have my phone on me? I already have a thing in my hand, but then I have something in my hand. Like, where's my phone? It's in my pocket, if I have a pocket, or because women's clothes don't have pockets, it's in my backpack. And my backpack can carry a card key just as easily, so why is this good? When I go into the hotel late at night and I don't really want to talk to a human, guess what? You still have to go to the front desk, because it wouldn't make any sense for them to just let any schmo with their phone go up to a hotel and, like, I need to give them my credit card and my ID. So that's the one pain point that I had hoped it would solve that it actually won't. So I can't think of a reason. And you will find many times when customers ask for something and you ask this, they kind of say, well, it'd just be nice to have. Don't build that! You have too many other things to build. You hear nice to have, cross it off your roadmap. Immediately, you have my blessing. You can tell your manager to talk to me if they're upset about it. I'll take emails. Since you don't have it today, what's your current workaround? So someone comes to you like, I can't believe you don't have this feature. And you're like, I know, I'm sorry. Again, apologize. You're right, I'm sorry, diffuse. And then you're like, I know we don't have it. So what are you doing today? How are we solving that problem? If they are not solving that problem, it's not a problem. If they are using Excel and email and Post-it notes and whiteboards, that's a workaround, and you should understand that workaround, even if you don't think it belongs in the scope of your feature. It's their process. And whatever you produce has to be better than that process. And something that involves 3 different apps might seem terrible, but if it's something people are already using, it's probably okay. But again, if they don't have a workaround, it's not a problem. Cross it off your roadmap. See, I'm making you guys' roadmap much smaller here. You could say, in the last 6 months, how often has this happened? Suppose I talk about losing my card key and how it's such a pain. Okay, in the last 6 months, how often has that happened? Once. What'd you do? I went to the desk and told them I lost my room key, and they gave me a new one. How long did that take? 3 minutes. All right, this is not something worth solving. Now, if I'd said that this situation happened, oh gosh, let's see, I've spent 100 nights in hotels, and this has happened like 80% of the time, and that's a different scale. When things have happened and they're especially embarrassing or especially recent, we tend to overblow them as customers. When you ask something like this, you're applying a level of, okay, that was upsetting, and now let's reality check it, and we're going to say it in a very polite way, but this is the thing we want to know. Your competitor has this feature. So sometimes the nice to have is, well, Google has that. Well, Amazon has it. You're right, they do. I'd love to hear your impression of their solution. So when people tell you that a competitor has this feature, they usually haven't used the feature. They usually don't even understand what it is. They just see that like they have a toy that you don't have, and I would like it. And so it's important, like, what do you think you would be getting out of this? And you have to ask it in a really nice way, but like, what do you think you're missing out on? And sometimes you can ask follow-up questions like, who do you know that's using that feature with competitor product? Oh, no one. Oh, okay, you do know someone. What's the value they're getting? At no time are you arguing that your product is better, but you have to see, like, where does that I want the toy come from? Is it from a place of rationality? Usually not. And if you can point that out, you're never going to tell someone they're wrong and have them say yes, but you can kind of lead them down the path where they're like, well, maybe it's not that important. And then it kind of quietly disappears off the list of things to talk about on your next call. And it's a very face-saving way to let people do this. Sometimes people say, well, I might need it in the future, especially enterprise clients. They'll always need this thing in the future. Oh, yeah, we're gonna need this later. Always. And so again, this is where you have to be extremely diplomatic. But you're like, okay, you mentioned this might come in handy in the future. How are you anticipating your needs changing? What? Well, you said you might need it in the future, so what's going to be different in the future? And if they say, I don't know, don't build it. Then you're going to say, great, I'll check back with you in the future. Because then you'll know what you need, and then I know what we can build, and it'll turn out well. Now, you might hear someone say, oh, we're expanding into 6 global offices. Oh, we're going into new markets. We really need this localization. That's legit. You can build that stuff. But if people don't know, don't build it. All of these require a very sweet, I can't possibly be telling you you're wrong tone, but they work really well, even with antagonistic clients. I've done this many times. And my favorite, absolute favorite, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about the situation, hotel travel, doesn't have to be possible, that part is critical, what would it be? And sometimes you have to kind of say, let's take a step back from the stuff we've been talking about. Let's forget these specific features. If you could wave a magic wand and change anything about hotel stays, what would it be? That is something that customers care about a lot. You might not be building it, but it's a thing that's important to them, and you might be able to capture some of the nuance somewhere else. So a lot of times when people answer this question, they answer it in a fairly emotional way. They're talking about something that's frustrating or that angers them, or where their team is making a lot of errors, or people just feel embarrassed, or they're not collaborating. You might not think that that's something you can build into a product, but you probably can. There's probably some way that you can nudge people to communicate with each other, or make notifications clearer, or make rollback clearer. But this is the thing that people care about. And so they might have spent a lot of time requesting specific features, and then when you ask this, you hear something totally different. And it's just a really amazing reality check. And sometimes people will look at you funny, and there'll be a long, awkward silence, and let it sit, because then what they talk about is the thing they're really going to care about. And that's a thing that hopefully you will buy and they will build. So, you can ask me any questions that come up after this. Like I said, if your manager's like, what? Who is this crazy person who told you you don't need to build things? You really can send them my way and I'll talk to them. I have a book, Lean Customer Development. It talks about some of the details of how to have these interviews. And if your team who couldn't be here should listen to me, I do workshops as well. So thank you very much, everyone.